David Gilmour's solo on Another Brick in the Wall doesn't get the same attention as his Comfortably Numb solos, but I think it's just as great, and it's the one I probably find myself returning to most often when I want to study the way he maintains interest during his solos. What makes this solo so interesting is that Gilmour combines a melodic technique and a rhythmic technique, two simple ideas that on their own you'd barely notice, but the way he alternates them is what creates all the tension, and I want to show you exactly how that works. It's also played over a chord progression with a puzzle built into it. It doesn't fit neatly into a single key, and Gilmour navigates it in a way that's almost perfect. In this video, I'm going to break down his solo phrase by phrase and show you exactly what he's playing and why it works. I'm also going to do a lesson within a lesson about the multi-step bends in the solo. There's one bend sequence in particular that I found really difficult to play on my guitar, and I had to borrow a technique from Guthrie Govan just to play it consistently. I'll show you that. By the end of this video, you'll understand what scales Gilmour is using and how to visualize them, what chord tones he's targeting in each phrase of the solo, how ghost notes create rhythmic momentum in his phrases, and how to approach his signature multi-step bends. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name's Keith, and Fret Science is all about making improvising over chord changes easier by giving you better mental models and visualization techniques. If you like what you see and you want to go deeper on improvisation, check out the Fret Science Patreon. There are hundreds of lessons available there, including my step-by-step flagship courses, Improv 101, and the new Complete Scale Fluency. There's a downloadable PDF lesson that covers all the key topics from this video and a backing track to practice with. All right, let's dive in. Every solo lives in the context of a song's harmony, so we have to start there. The verses are just played over a D minor triad. And the chorus adds G, C, and F chords. Those chords all fit inside three neighboring wedges of the circle of fifths. And whenever that happens, the key of the progression comes from the middle major chord, which in this case is C. So we can say that the song's in the key of C major. But because there's such a strong focus on the D minor chord, and D feels like the tonal center, we'd say this song is in the D Dorian mode. The entire solo section is played over the D minor bass vamp from the verse section. But the organ plays some different chords over it. There are 8 bars of D minor, and then there are 8 bars that alternate between 2 bars of G with 2 bars of D minor. And then it gets interesting. There are 2 bars of C, which fits D Dorian, but then there are 2 bars of B flat. So B flat doesn't belong in D Dorian. It does fit in the F major wedge of the circle of fifths, and since D is still the tonal center, that would make it D Aeolian, or natural minor. D Dorian and D Aeolian are 2 different scales, but they do have 6 notes in common. So we have a progression that's partly Dorian and partly Aeolian, and no single key accounts for all 4 chords. That's the puzzle. Now, one obvious answer to what scale do I use is D minor pentatonic. That fits both, and that's not wrong. Gilmour uses it for most of his solo. There is another scale that covers all 4 chords. It's called D minor hexatonic, and it just adds a second to the minor pentatonic scale. It's exactly the 6 notes that are shared between those 4 chords. So we have 4 possible scales to use: D minor pentatonic, D minor hexatonic, D Dorian, or D Aeolian. I'll show you how to visualize all 4 of these on the fretboard and which ones David Gilmour used as we go through the solo. Let's get into it. The first 8 bars of the solo are all over D minor, and Gilmour plays this whole section inside the familiar Form 1 D minor pentatonic scale. The first phrase bends up to a D, the root of the chord, right on the downbeat, and then plays double stops from the D minor triad. The double stops are played as a staccato rhythmic figure, which you'll call back to a few times later in the solo. Staccato just means short and cut off. Setting up a simple rhythmic idea like this and then referring back to it later is a great way to maintain interest during a solo. We can visualize the D minor target notes inside the scale. I visualize the target note for the bend as being here at the 10th fret of the E string, which is a whole step bend up from the 13th fret of the B string. And then the double stops are right below that. Next, Gilmour goes into his first multi-bend. He bends the C note at the 13th fret of the B string up to a D, and then without releasing it, bends it up another whole step to E, which is not in the pentatonic scale. Then he releases it back to C. These notes are all inside the Dorian mode and the minor hexatonic scale, so I want to pause for a moment to talk about this visualization. You'll notice that there are red and blue boxes around different parts of the pentatonic scale. I call the red shape the rectangle and the blue shape the stack. And as you'll see, they make it easy to visualize chords and scales all over the neck. That's because each note position in these shapes is always the same interval relative to the root. The minor pentatonic root is always the lower note of the upper string in the rectangle and the upper note of the middle string in the stack. And it's easy to find these rectangles and stacks inside all 5 of the usual pentatonic positions. You just have to watch out for when they fall across the G and B strings because they get distorted a bit. I have a whole video on that if you want to learn more. The cool thing about the rectangle and stack is that it's at the core of most of the scales we actually use. If we want to play the minor hexatonic scale that I mentioned earlier, we just have to add one note in the rectangle and one just outside the stack. And that gives us usable fingerings in all 5 pentatonic positions. If we wanted to play the Dorian mode, we just add a second note. We can also use this to find chord tones to target. We've been playing over a D minor chord, and the 3 notes from that chord are always in the same spots inside the rectangle and stack. Let's jump back to the solo, but we'll come back to this idea. And if you want to go deeper on this video will show you how to visualize 15 different scales in about 15 minutes. I'll also go deeper on the multi-bend technique when we get to the next one, which is really challenging. The next little phrase is pure pentatonic, and he targets the 5th of the chord. And then he plays a minor hexatonic lick before calling back to the earlier double stops. That one quick double stop on the 12th fret suggests a G chord. We can visualize G chord tones anywhere on the neck using these locations around the rectangle and stack, and that's about to come in handy. Because we now get to the first chord change, to G major, and Gilmour bends up to the root and adds another staccato tag. And then this is where the solo gets genuinely challenging to play. Gilmour does a 5-stage multi-bend targeting 3 different notes. He bends up from C to D, which is the 5th of the G chord. Then without releasing the bend, he bends further to an E, which is the 6th, and then even more up to the F, which is the flat 7th. So that's a 5 semitone bend. This is the most straightforward way to finger it. The most important thing about any bend is pitch accuracy. A sloppy bend sounds amateur, and there's really no hiding it. I found that it's almost impossible to bend reliably in tune using only muscle memory. The amount of force you need to use depends on how close you are to the nut, your string gauge, your scale length, your action height, your fretboard radius, and whether or not your bridge is floating or fixed. So whenever you're practicing keeping bends in tune, I recommend listening to the notes you're trying to hit without a bend. Lock in how they sound and then practice getting the bend to match. For this one, it'd be something like... Your muscle memory will eventually get you 90% of the way there, but the only real solution is to use your ears, and that requires a lot of practice to get right. On this guitar, it's challenging to make that bend work in the traditional way, but I borrowed a trick that I learned from a Guthrie Govan video a few years ago. It's not that hard to learn to slide while holding a bend. So the way I play this multi-bend is I bend up the 13th fret a whole step, and then I slide up 2 frets to reach the E note, and then I bend up slightly again to get the F note. And then I slide back down while releasing the bend to hit the C note, and finally bend back up to the D. So it sounds like this. I find it's easiest if you release each bend a little just as you slide, because it gives your ear a better chance to help you nail the pitch. I don't necessarily think Gilmour played it this way, but for me it makes it much easier to make it sound consistent. Okay, back to the solo. When Gilmour finally lands on the D at the end of that phrase, the chord has just changed to D minor, so even after all of that, he's right back at the root. In the next 4 bars, we have 2 bars of G major and 2 of D minor. Over the first 3 bars of that, Gilmour plays a pentatonic run that starts on form 1 and works its way down the pentatonic diagonal to position 5, landing on a D note, which is the root. This is another place that the rectangle and stack visualization helps. It makes it easy to shift positions across the fretboard. Then on the last of the 4 bars and into the next G chord, he switches down to form 4 and adds the hexatonic note in again as a passing tone. This whole phrase is more rhythm and feel than melody. He's settling in a bit here and calling back to the earlier staccato phrases before beginning the climb up to the climax of the solo. And then he jumps up to form 1 and does another multi-bend. Over the next G chord, he shifts up to form 2 and bends up to an A, which is the 9th of G. He hints at hexatonic again and then bends back and forth between G and A, the root and the 9, and then lands on a D, which is the 5 of G. Gilmour's been climbing the fretboard, and now he gets to the peak. Over the C chord, he shifts up to form 4 and plays the highest bends of the solo, up to the C and then to D, which is the 9 of C. Then he gets rhythmic again with some staccato notes, both up in form 4 and then down in form 1. Now remember that B flat chord from the beginning, the one that didn't belong in the key? Here's how Gilmour handles it. He chooses to play some rhythmic double stop chord fragments from D minor, G, and C, and then lands on a chord fragment from D minor just as the chord changes to D minor. So he's not chasing the B flat. So he doesn't chase the B flat. He plays through it using bits of the other chords, G and C, and sidesteps the problem entirely. And by putting the focus on the rhythm, the harmony just doesn't matter quite as much. Sometimes the best answer to a harmonic puzzle is to not engage with it directly. The rest of the solo echoes the rhythmic playing from earlier with a fair number of ghost notes that add a lot to the rhythmic feel. He targets a D note, the 9th, over the C chord, and then shifts down to form 3 and plays a final sequence that lands on the root D. There are several factors that I think make this solo great. Gilmour takes two main ideas, long multibends and staccato rhythms, and alternates them throughout the solo, mixed in with some pretty basic pentatonic licks. He also builds up to a climax by moving up the fretboard, departing from the pentatonic scale to emphasize some ninths before returning to lower frets and sticking the landing on the root. It works so well because he's always aware of what chord he's playing over and which notes he's emphasizing. He sticks mostly to minor pentatonic, but adds in just enough flavor from the Dorian mode to keep things interesting. I've been listening to this solo for over 40 years, and what it keeps teaching me is how little you actually need. 2 techniques, mostly 1 scale, and somehow it's one of the most expressive guitar solos ever put on tape. That's what studying Gilmour always comes back to for me. It's not about having more tools, it's about knowing the ones you have well enough to make them say something. If you want the PDF version of this lesson with the full chord tone overlay diagrams and additional practice tips, plus a backing track, they're available to all paid Fret Science Patreon subscribers. Links in the description. And my full courses are available at Patreon at the gold tier and above. Before you go, leave me a comment and let me know what solo you'd like me to break down next. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. I'll see you next time.